There's something most men completely misread in attraction, and it quietly changes everything. A woman can be emotionally hooked, deeply invested, even thinking about you when you're not around, and still act like she doesn't care at all. In fact, the stronger the emotional pull becomes, the more some women try to hide it from themselves, not just from you, because acknowledging it would force them to confront something uncomfortable about their own feelings, their own vulnerability, and their own sense of control. And here's the twist. The signs are not obvious attraction signals. They're contradictions. So the real question is this: are you paying attention to what she shows you, or what she tries so hard not to show herself? In the next few minutes, you're going to understand 5 very specific psychological patterns that appear when a woman is emotionally attached, but actively suppressing it in her own mind. Not games, not manipulation, real human psychology. We'll break down what attachment theory, emotional dissonance, and unconscious bonding behaviors actually look like in real interactions, especially in modern dating dynamics where people are hyper aware of their emotions but still try to control them. By the end of this video, you won't just guess interest anymore. You'll recognize emotional attachment even when it's being hidden behind calm behavior, distance, or even denial. And more importantly, you'll understand what that actually means for how you respond. Let's go deep. You have a moment with her where everything feels aligned. Conversation flows. There's warmth, even subtle vulnerability. Then suddenly, she pulls back, slower replies, shorter tone, slight emotional distance that wasn't there before. At first, it feels confusing, but psychologically, this is classic emotional regulation conflict. When someone starts bonding, the attachment system activates. But if they're not ready to admit that attachment, the mind tries to regain control by creating distance. It's a push-pull between feeling and self-protection. This is often tied to avoidant tendencies in attachment styles. Not absence of feeling, but discomfort with dependence. What you should not do is chase the distance. That intensifies internal conflict. Instead, stay consistent, calm, unreactive, because emotional truth doesn't respond to pressure, it responds to safety, and this pattern often leads directly into the next sign. You mentioned something casually days ago, a childhood memory, a preference, a random story. You didn't think much of it, but later she brings it up with surprising accuracy, almost like she stored it without trying. This is where emotional attachment becomes unconscious. Psychologically, the brain prioritizes emotionally relevant information. When someone is emotionally hooked, even subtly, their attention system begins tagging that person as high importance. This is linked to selective attention and emotional salience. The brain literally filters memory based on emotional charge. But here's the key contradiction. She might still act indifferent while demonstrating deep retention of your details. That's the split. Feeling is happening below awareness, but identity hasn't caught up yet. And when someone is in that state, they often try to downplay their own attachment even more, which leads to behavior that seems inconsistent on the surface. And inconsistency always tells a story, which brings us to something even more revealing. You notice it in subtle ways. Her humor starts matching yours. Her phrases begin to sound familiar. Her energy shifts closer to yours over time. Then, almost as if she catches herself, she resets, acts slightly more neutral again. This is unconscious mirroring followed by conscious correction. Mirroring is one of the most basic forms of human bonding. It happens automatically when emotional connection is forming. It's part of the brain's social alignment system. We naturally synchronize with people we feel drawn to. But when someone is trying not to feel that connection, they become aware of the mirroring and try to undo it. It's like the mind saying, this is happening, but I shouldn't let it show. That internal correction is actually proof of emotional involvement, not absence of it. Because indifference doesn't correct itself, only emotional tension does. And once you understand this, you start seeing the next pattern everywhere. Here's something most people get wrong about emotional attachment. It doesn't always grow through closeness. Sometimes it grows through suppression. When someone tries not to think about a person, the brain actually increases cognitive activation around that person, a rebound effect in attention psychology. So the harder she tries to stay neutral, the more emotionally active her internal world becomes. Strange, isn't it? But this is where attraction becomes counterintuitive, because what looks like distance on the surface can actually be internal intensity. Keep that in mind as we go deeper. You say something simple, neutral even, but she reacts slightly stronger than expected, a little defensiveness, a subtle shift in tone, or unexpected emotional sensitivity. Then later, she acts like nothing happened. This mismatch is a key indicator of suppressed emotional attachment. Psychologically, this is cognitive dissonance. When internal feelings don't match external behavior, tension builds. That tension leaks out as disproportionate reactions, because emotions that aren't acknowledged don't disappear, they surface indirectly. So instead of saying, "I feel something for you," the emotion comes out as irritation, overthinking, or sudden withdrawal. And then the mind quickly tries to restore balance by pretending it wasn't significant. This cycle repeats quietly. What matters here is not the reaction itself, but the inconsistency between trigger and response. Emotionally neutral people stay neutral. Emotionally conflicted people fluctuate, and that fluctuation is always meaningful, which leads us to the final and most revealing sign. When you're around, she maintains control, composed, sometimes even slightly distant, but when you step back, even subtly, something changes. She becomes more observant, more engaged. Sometimes she reopens communication without clear reason. This is intermittent reinforcement at work. The brain doesn't just bond through presence, it bonds through pattern disruption. When emotional reward is inconsistent, the mind pays more attention. It starts tracking availability, behavior shifts, and emotional gaps. But here's the deeper layer. If she's emotionally hooked but trying to suppress it, your absence removes the emotional regulation anchor she was using to stay composed. So the feelings become more noticeable internally. That's why distance sometimes creates clarity, not confusion. But clarity doesn't always lead to admission. Sometimes it leads to more suppression, and that internal tension is where emotional attachment becomes strongest and most hidden. Here's the deeper truth most people miss. When someone hides their own feelings from themselves, it's rarely about you. It's about what those feelings would mean if they were real. Vulnerability, risk, loss of control, the possibility of rejection, the fear of misjudging the situation. So the mind creates a quiet negotiation. I don't feel this strongly. I'm just being logical. I'm just observing. But behavior doesn't lie. Emotion always leaks through structure, through timing, through inconsistency, through attention. And if you've ever felt confused by someone's mixed signals, it's usually not confusion. It's conflict that hasn't been resolved inside them yet. The hardest part to accept is this. Sometimes people are emotionally connected to you long before they're willing to admit it, even to themselves, and in that space between feeling and acceptance, you see the most honest version of human attraction, not expressed, not declared, but lived quietly in behavior. If this resonated with you, it probably means you've experienced this kind of dynamic before, where the signs were there, but not spoken directly. The real skill is not chasing clarity from word, but learning to read emotional patterns in behavior. So let me ask you this. Have you ever looked back at a situation and realized the signs were obvious? You just didn't interpret them correctly at the time? Share your experience in the comments. I read them, and they often shape future breakdowns like this. And next time, we'll go even deeper into something most men misunderstand completely: why emotionally unavailable behavior is often the strongest early stage attraction signal, and when it is not. Until then, remember this: people don't always say what they feel, but they almost always show it.